So let's look at income tax. So here's a £90,000 property, £67,500 mortgage, and it's making you £219 a month coming out of the property. Okay, in real simple terms, this isn't how it is. So if you're a 40% taxpayer, you'll pay 40% tax. If you're 20% taxpayer, you'll pay 20% tax. If you're no taxpayer, well, you pay none. Isn't just like that, especially with clause 24, but for simplicity, just to show you the principles. Yep, okay. Now let's assume, how many people, if I asked you, and I said, you know when you were being brought up by your parents, did your parents bring you up and teach you that debt was bad and you should pay it off and not have any of it, and that was saving was a good thing? Well, if you're anything like me, that was how I was brought up. Here's the thing. First of all, you need to thank your parents, because you wouldn't be in a position to potentially invest or have an interest if they hadn't brought you up like that. In the average room of society, only 60% of hands go up. So your parents have done a great thing. However, here's the challenge. Your parents probably, if you put your hand up, are what are going to be called savers, not investors. A saver believes that debt is bad, and investing in believes or understands that good debt and bad debt exist. So let me give you a definition to hammer this home. A bad debt is a debt that you have to pay whether you use something or not. So right now, today, I spent the day with me, but if you've got a mortgage or you're paying rent, that's a bad debt, because you had to pay for the house even though you're not in it today. If you've got a car loan, you might not have driven the car all week because you're on holiday. You still have to pay for the car. It's something that costs you money whether you're there or not. That's bad debt. So what's good debt? Well, a good debt for me has two salient points. The first is somebody else pays for it, not me. If you've got a debt but somebody else pays for it, not me, that's piece number one. Piece number two is it also makes me money on top. Somebody else paying for it and it makes me money on top. How many of those would you like? An infinite amount, please. Therefore, how much good debt would you like? An infinite amount, please. Whatever you give me, I'm going to explain this in more detail in a minute. Richard Branson, whatever you think of him, you know he's definitely a successful business person. He's been quoted recently as one of his written goals. I want to be one of the first persons to die with a personal debt of £1 billion or more. Personal written goal, because he knows if he has £1 billion of good debt, what will this be making him? Just a crazy amount of money. Now, I'm not saying get to £1 billion, you don't need to. Let's assume now we've got these principles, and let's assume we take two identical people. I taught them this stuff. One says, I get what you say, what you're teaching me, but I can't help it. I was brought up by my family to pay off my debts, pay all my debts down. I just have to pay the debt off, even though you're telling me not to. So I got to pay it off, so let's look at what happens. So for the next 10-15 years, John works really hard. Let's assume he's got identical jobs. We've got identical semi-detached properties that are next door to each other, identical incomes, and for the next 15 years, everything's identical. The only difference is John takes 67,500 of his earned income and he uses it over the 15 years to pay the mortgage to zero. Whereas Colin, who's on my mentorship program, says, I know better than that. I'm not going to pay it down. Okay, so what's the reward that John gets for his 10 or 15 years?